Gradius II Gofa no Yabo was released for the Famicom game system. That's the Japanese version of the NES by Nintendo in 1988. And it was the much anticipated sequel to Gradius. It is a game that we did not see available in North America. That's why you're looking at the Famicom cartridge and not the NES cartridge. Let me start by saying I was a huge fan of Gradius, the first one, for the NES. And in North America, the sequel that we saw was called Life Force, and it was almost a different game. It was somewhat related, but it wasn't a direct sequel. And I believe Life Force was a remake of an arcade game called Salamander. But that's neither here nor there. Here is the real deal, what Konami considered the sequel to Gradius. And right off the bat, we have an option to choose what type of weapon configuration we get. Otherwise, the gameplay is identical to Gradius. You pick up those little power-ups, and they move your little power-up bar along the bottom. And when you feel comfortable with the selection you've made, you hit your other button. Not your fire button, but the other button. And that selects the option choice. So if you want to power up your missiles, you collect those little red gem dealies, those little power-up deals, until missiles is highlighted. Then hit your power-up activation button, and voila, you have missiles. And so on and so forth for all the other weapons. Now, fans of the Gradius series and fans of the Gradius series that have played Life Force in particular, or Salamander, depending on what continent you're on, will notice that this game has a lot of common elements of Life Force. I haven't played Life Force in many years, but right away it felt very familiar. A lot of enemies were the same, so on and so on. So it felt like a very familiar game, even though I had never played it before in my life. And our friends in Europe may recognize this game as Vulcan Venture, I believe was the name of it. Anyhow, continental name differences aside, this game was a Japan-only release as the title Gradius II, and a Europe-only as Vulcan Venture. And it was never seen in North America or other parts of the world. So needless to say, I was very excited when I came across a copy of this for the Famicom, and I just so happened to have a Japanese Famicom. So I was really anxious and excited to give this a try. And let me tell you, my first impressions were, holy f***, this game is impossible. I died about 400 times in the first 10 minutes of the game. I died so many times that I thought, maybe I was perhaps doing something wrong. Maybe it's been a few more years than I'd like to admit since I've played a side-scrolling shooter, and maybe my reaction and reflexes were a little bit off. So I, took a deep breath and tried a couple more times. Played for about 25 minutes straight, and I could not get past the first level. I was like, what the f***? I can't possibly be this bad. I don't know. I thought maybe I was missing some kind of obvious trick to this level. That it is the first level. It's supposed to be, by definition, the easiest level to get you accustomed to the game and familiarize yourself with the controls and all that stuff. So I actually took a 20-minute break from the game and went online and did a little research on the game itself. And lo and behold, it's notoriously difficult in the first level. In fact, this game was cited as possibly the most difficult first level in video game history. So at least, it wasn't because I was just a poor video game player after all these years. At least I can hold on to that. So I guess I've made my point that Gradius II is a very, very hard game, at least in the first level. The first stage is really hard. And if you like a challenge in a shooter, then this is it. I mean, it doesn't get any more challenging than this. I mean, it is supremely a challenge. They give you the option to continue after you lose your 3 lives. But this isn't much of a help on the first stage because it puts you back at the beginning of the stage. It just makes it a little bit easier than getting up and hitting the reset button if you want to give it another go. And believe me, you're not going to get through this level in one try. Even if you're a veteran side-scrolling shooter player, I mean, this is as hard as it gets. And you know, in Nintendo's first run with the NES/Famicom, there were a lot of games that were released in Japan for the Famicom that were never brought over to the US for the Nintendo NES or in other markets. And I remember reading as a kid that the reasoning behind that was that the game was too challenging. At least the game makers thought it was too challenging for an American audience. And I used to remember reading that and thinking that's total bullshit. Give me the challenge. I mean, I was a hardcore gamer. I wanted the challenge, and I thought it was, you know, a bit presumptuous of the Japanese game makers to say, oh, we won't release this in the US because it's too hard. And let me tell you, I don't know if that's the case with Gradius II. It wasn't released here because they thought it was too hard. But fucking A, right, it is hard. Well, enough of me grumbling about the difficulty. Let's get on to whether or not this game is worth the money. And let me tell you, if you're outside of Japan, finding Famicom games, especially popular titles like Gradius, it can get expensive. I paid, I think it was $25 or $20. It's probably about $20 at a convention for this game. And I didn't know anything about it, but I knew I liked Gradius, and I knew Gradius II wasn't available, at least in this form, in the US, so I thought it was, you know, worth owning in that respect. And it is. But if you get frustrated easily, steer clear of this one, man, because I got a feeling years down the road, I'll still be trying to get past level 1. But it's a good game in that respect, and I did look online and see what the other levels look like, and they look really cool. So maybe someday I'll get there. Well, you could always hope. I'm your host, Dommy, for Classic Games Revisited. Until next time.